The relationship between the United States government and Hollywood began before motion pictures were even invented. The Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 was the first major act of this era passed by the United States Congress in response to the monopolistic tendencies that the capitalist market typically swayed toward. The objective of this act was to maintain a healthy level of competition in an industry. This act was a major piece of legislation that affected all industries and not just the film industry, as the technology to record moving images had not been created yet. But the film studios of the future would come up against this particular act time and time again. By 1910, the American film industry was not the most dominant around the world. At the time, the international film market was dominated by France with Pathé and Gaumont Film Company, who were the two major studio forces before the outbreak of the First World War. This war forever changed the possible trajectory of the European and international market. France entered the war on August 3, 1914, and remained involved until the conclusion in 1918. During this time period, the United States government was defining what cinema and the film industry would mean for their country moving forward. In 1915, there was a substantial case brought before the Supreme Court entitled Mutual Film Corporation versus the Industrial Commission of Ohio, 236 U.S. 230. The case centered around whether the free speech which was present in the state Constitution of Ohio and the Constitution of the United States extended to motion pictures. The case was argued on January 6th and 7th of that year and decided on February 23rd. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Industrial Commission of Ohio in a landslide 9-0 vote. The main outcome of this is defined in the following text obtained from supremejustia.com. The exhibition of moving pictures is a business pure and simple, originated and conducted for profit like other spectacles, and not to be regarded as part of the press of the country or as organs of public opinion within the meaning of freedom of speech and publication guaranteed by the Constitution of Ohio. This effectively states what film companies were in the eyes of the US government. They were not art, they were not platforms for public opinion. It's quite amazing that a nation which prides itself on their value of individual freedom and expression declared that films could be subjected to censorship by local and national authorities under the guise of being a business. In 1917, the United States entered the First World War. The president at the time, Woodrow Wilson, understood the power of communication media, and he set up the Committee on Public Information. It was also dubbed the Creel Committee after its chairperson, George Creel. Creel contacted studios such as renowned picture corporations to help make films that would sway the non-interventionist American public that going to war in Europe was the right thing to do. The films that were made were mired in Germanophobia and were effectively propaganda films. So films were no longer just to make money, they were also there to help sway the minds of people in a direction the current US administration wanted them to go. They were still not art, nor were they places for public dissent or expression. In turn, after the war, the United States Congress passed an act entitled the Webb-Pomeranian Export Trade Act. This act, in short, allowed studios to merge together while operating abroad and exporting their goods to countries that were still recovering from the war. The film exporters that were operating abroad soon became the Motion Pictures Producers and Distributors of America, the MPPDA, in 1922. Its name was changed to the Motion Picture Association of America, MPAA, from 1945 until September 2019. It is currently known as the Motion Picture Association. The association enlisted former RNC chairman William H. Hayes to become their inaugural chairman. Hayes would represent the association for over 2 decades. Hayes was charged with rehabilitating Hollywood's image after the murder of William Desmond Taylor and the death of actress Virginia Rappe by violent sexual assault, which led to widespread condemnation of the industry by religious, civic, and political organizations. Many felt the movie industry was morally questionable, and it was Hayes' job to clean it up. The 1920s was a decade in which the major studios of the golden age of Hollywood took power and began to build themselves into major companies. They did this through a myriad of different strategies. The first strategy began in the 1910s, and it was known as vertical integration, which is when a company is involved in all 3 branches of its businesses: production, distribution, and exhibition in the case of a film studio. It became clear that a small group of vertically integrated companies could dominate an industry if they followed the same business strategies. This is also known as an oligopoly. The main companies that rose using these tactics were MGM, 20th Century Fox, Warner Brothers, RKO, and Paramount Pictures. They were known as the Big Five Studios, while Universal, United Artists, and Columbia Pictures were known as the Little Three. These 8 studios became known as the Majors, and they would dominate the US film industry for decades. The studio's dominance didn't spring up from controlling the means of production. They gained control by controlling the exhibition of their films. They didn't own that many movie theaters. In fact, their total percentage of owned theaters in the United States was never over 15%. But what they did do was own the theaters in the largest metropolitan areas. They owned only 15% of theaters, but they gained nearly 70% of the total box office income in the entire country from the theaters they did own. The other tactic they used so effectively was block booking. Under this business practice, the major studios would not let smaller independent theaters just take one of their films. If they wanted one film to screen, the studio forced them to take 5 or 6.
I know you're not following what I'm saying anyway, right? That's okay, that doesn't matter. The real question is this: was all this legal? Absolutely fucking not.
Now, there were antitrust laws in place such as the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 and the more recent Clayton Act of 1914. In fact, throughout the 1920s there were several investigations into the studios. The case eventually went to the Supreme Court, and in 1930 distributors were found guilty of violating antitrust law. But the studios continued their practices for nearly 2 decades after this ruling. How? Well, the terrible misfortune of the Wall Street crash and the Great Depression that followed was a blessing in disguise for the studios. Nearly every business in America suffered deep fiscal losses in the early part of the 1930s, and the Hollywood studios were no different. In late 1932, Franklin Roosevelt was elected President of the United States of America.
Enough. I think we all ought to go out to Hollywood from Hyde Park. We'd be good, you know. They got us all trained. I am glad of this opportunity to extend my deep appreciation to the electorate of this country, which gave me yesterday such a great vote of confidence. It is a vote that had more than mere party significance. It transcended party lines and became a national expression of liberal thought. It means, I am sure, that the masses of the people of the nation firmly believe that there is great and actual possibility in an orderly recovery through a well-conceived and actively directed plan of action. Such a plan has been presented to you, and you have expressed approval of it. This, my friends, is most reassuring to me. It shows that there is in this country unbounded confidence in the future of sound agriculture and of honorable industry.
And immediately his administration was challenged with saving the crumbling economy. To combat this, within his first 100 days in office, Franklin Roosevelt brought in several acts. Among them was the NIRA, the National Industrial Recovery Act. The NIRA became law on the 16th of June 1933. They established the National Recovery Administration to institute and to supervise the codes for fair competition for all US industries. The law assumed that the industry's dominant trade association would write the code. If not, President Roosevelt could impose a government-authored code. In exchange for acceptance of a code, the industry became exempt from any prosecution under antitrust laws. Under pressure from various religious groups, William H. Hayes presided over the enforcement of a moral production code. Although he did not make the code, it was based on the complaints from the public and religious elders, and his name would be permanently attached to it. At first, the studios did not adhere to the code, and movies even taunted regulations by becoming racier. But Hollywood had to take the code seriously when President Roosevelt took office in 1933. If the studios wanted to protect their monopolistic practices under the NRA, they'd have to make a choice: seriously adopt the code, which would dictate the content of their films, or allow their stranglehold on the exhibition industry to be broken. They went with the production code. Without Roosevelt's direct action, who would have known what the US film industry would have become? Would it have survived the economic downturn of the 1930s and become revitalized again before World War II? Maybe, but with Roosevelt, he ensured it would without question. This break from antitrust lawsuits did not last long, however, and by 1935 the NRA was gone. On July 20th, 1938, the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against Paramount, Universal, MGM, United Artists, 20th Century Fox, Warner Brothers, Columbia, and RKO for violating antitrust laws. This became known as the Paramount case.